Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, an almanac of garden history, literature, and small botanical joys. I'm Jennifer Eadling, and today is March 11th. There's a certain kind of person who loves a long view. They're the ones who keep notes, the ones who label envelopes, the ones who plant something they might never see in full. Today's show is for that kind of gardener. For gardeners who believe the future is built in small, quiet moments, and that a garden can hold memory the way soil holds a seed. Here's today's garden history. It was on this day in 1833 that the American botanist William James Beal was born. William was the kind of botanist who didn't just admire plants. He tested them, he watched them, he made the garden prove its own truths. In 1873, at Michigan Agricultural College, now Michigan State University, William created what he called a wild garden. Not wild as in neglected, wild as in honest. Instead of stiff, formal beds meant to impress, William built a living laboratory, a place where students learned botany with their hands in the dirt and their eyes on the plant. And then, in 1879, William began the experiment that still makes gardeners stop and listen. He buried 20 glass bottles of seeds, 50 seeds in each, from 21 species, tucked away in a secret location on campus. He wanted farmers to understand something gardeners learn the hard way. The soil remembers. That a seed can wait decades, a lifetime, longer than a human life. The bottles were meant to be unearthed slowly over generations, and the map to their location passed from one lead botanist to the next, like a kind of scientific heirloom. They even dig them up in the middle of the night. A small group, quiet voices, careful hands, because light can trigger germination. In 2021, the most recently unearthed bottle revealed something astonishing. Seeds of moth mullein, Verbascum blattaria, still able to germinate after 142 years underground. William's experiment is scheduled to continue until the year 2100, which means this is a garden story still unfolding. William also wrote a lecture called The New Botany, arguing that students should study plants first and books second. And when they struggled over a microscope, William had a down-home mantra for them: keep on squintin', because the truth, he believed, belongs to the ones who keep looking. And it was on this day in 1891 that the Danish botanist Jens Christian Clausen was born. Jens began life as a farm boy in Denmark, dirt under his fingernails, work before daylight. And he never really lost that sensibility, even after becoming one of the great botanical thinkers of the 20th century. Jens helped answer a question gardeners ask all the time. Why does a plant thrive in one yard and fail miserably in another, even when it's the same plant? Jens's life work centered on what we now call ecotypes, distinct genetic local versions of a plant shaped by the places they come from. In California, Jens and his colleagues cloned native plants. They grew identical copies at 3 very different elevations, from sea level to alpine conditions. Same plant, different place. And what they proved changed horticulture forever. A plant can adjust a little. That's plasticity. But its deepest survival is written in its genes. In other words, You can't sweet-talk a mountain plant into loving a lowland swamp. You can't coddle a drought-born plant into thriving in soggy soil. Jens gave gardeners a hard truth and a kindness. The hard truth is, sometimes a plant doesn't fail because you failed. It fails because it's not from your kind of weather. And the kindness is, when you choose plants with the right origin, gardening becomes less of a battle and more like a partnership. Jens spent years hauling plants up mountain trails for those experiments. Not just notebooks and data sheets, but flats of living material. A professor mountaineer, sweating for science, because he wanted plants to tell us the truth about where they belong. In today's Unearthed Words, we hear an excerpt from the American writer Katharine White from Green Thoughts in a Green Shade, a diary entry for this day, March 11th, in 1961. I have many recollections of the simple pleasure of gathering flowers, but none of them quite equals my memories of the pure happiness of picking water lilies on a New Hampshire lake. The lake was Chicora, and picking water lilies was not an unusual event for my next older sister and me. We spent the best summers of our girlhood on or in this lake, and we picked the lilies in the early morning, paddling to the head of the lake where the water was calm at the foot of the mountain, and the sun had just begun to open the white stars of the lilies. The stern paddle had to know precisely how to approach a lily, stem first, getting near enough so the girl in the bow could plunge her arm straight down into the cool water and break off the rubbery stem, at least a foot under the surface, without leaning too far overboard. It took judgment to select the 3 or 4 freshest flowers and the shapeliest lily pad to go with them, and it took skill not to upset the canoe. Once the dripping blossoms were gathered and placed in the shade of the bow seat, we paddled home with their heavenly fragrance mounted all around us. I know now that their lovely Latin name was Nymphea odorata, but at the time, I only knew that they were the common pond lily of Northeast America. Catherine Stewart had such a lovely way of thinking about and writing about the natural world. And isn't that how it goes? That our first knowledge of a plant is almost always sensory. Cold water, rubbery stems, and that fragrance rising in the canoe like a blessing. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Beatrix Farrand, Private Gardens, Public Landscapes by Judith B. Tankard. This book is part of Women Gardeners Week on the Daily Gardener, and this week's book recommendations all celebrate women who shaped gardens and landscapes, often without recognition. Beatrix Farrand designed gardens the way a composer writes music. Structure first, then variation, then a softness that makes you want to linger. Judith's biography is essential for gardeners who love design, but also love the why behind the design. You learn how Beatrix layered the famous mixed border, architecture, and abundance in one breath, and how she built garden rooms that felt lived in, not showy. And you'll see her guiding principle again and again in every story. Choose what will last, choose what belongs, choose plants that meet the place with dignity. It's the kind of book that makes you look at your own garden differently, not as a project to finish, but as a landscape to inhabit. And finally, here's something sweet to ignite the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day in 1544 that the Italian poet Torquato Tasso was born. Torquato didn't design gardens with spades or hedges. He designed them with words. In his epic poem, Jerusalem Delivered, he imagined the enchanted garden of Armida, a place so lush, so carefully arranged that art and nature blur into one. In the story, a sorceress named Armida holds the Christian knight Rinaldo there, in the garden, not with chains, but with beauty. Armida's garden blooms without seasons. The air is always gentle. Nothing wilts, nothing rests. But the perfection begins to press inward. The garden is entirely artificial, a place made to dazzle and to hold, a golden enclosure, beautiful and dangerous at once. Early in the poem, Rinaldo speaks a single line, "Hedge that divides the lovely garden and myself from me." The hedge does more than mark the garden's edge. It separates him from who he is becoming and from the woman he loves, whom he believes is more beautiful than any rose. Torquato reminds us that a garden can be a place of restoration and healing, but it can also become a place of stagnation or even exhaustion. Like Rinaldo, we sometimes have to leave a garden behind when it no longer serves us. As we close the show today, remember time is already doing its part. Seeds know how to wait. Plants know where they belong. And some mornings stay with us long after the lake has gone quiet again. You don't have to rush the knowing. Just keep tending what's in front of you. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.